Shattered Silence, A Journey of Survival and Healing, by Nanice Munoz, formerly Nicola Nooks. Chapter 1. The Beginning of Separation, A Mother's Decision. I can't recall the exact moment my mother handed me over to my grandmother, but that handoff is one of the first pivotal moments in my life. I was only a year and a half old when it happened. At that age, memories blur easily, fleeting like whispers carried off by the wind. Still, some events, no matter how faint, linger in the heart and carve out scars that never fade. The mystery of my mother's absence. I was sent to live with my grandmother, a decision that, in the world of an infant, could only be felt, not understood. My mother's reasons for this choice were never explained to me, but that single act shaped much of my childhood. Even as a small child, I carried the weight of absence, though I couldn't yet name it. The reasons behind her decision, or the emotions she might have felt, remained hidden from me for years. What I did know was that my grandmother became the foundation of my world. She loved me fiercely, stepping into the role my mother had left behind. In her care, I found a sense of safety, nurturing, and stability that my young heart so deeply needed. Her home became my home, the only one I truly knew. Still, the question of why I wasn't with my biological mother lingered, haunting me like a silent presence I could never shake. A grandmother's love, not spoken but shown. Living with my grandmother became my world. Her home, her voice, and her rules shaped the foundation of my earliest memories. My grandmother wasn't someone who expressed love through words. She never said, "I love you," but her actions spoke louder than any phrase ever could. She cared for me with unwavering devotion, creating a sense of comfort and stability that I didn't even realize I craved. She made sure I was safe, always provided what I needed, and supported me in ways that went beyond words. Her love was constant and deep, filling the unspoken spaces where verbal affirmations might have been. The unspoken questions, the longing for connection. As I grew older, questions about my mother began to surface, quietly stirring in my mind. Why had she made this decision? Why hadn't she kept me? The longing to understand her choices became an unspoken ache, a silent weight I carried. I didn't have the words to ask her, nor the courage to confront the unanswered questions. I don't remember the moment she brought me to live with my grandmother. At just 1 year and 6 months old, I was far too young to grasp what was happening or why. There's no image of her face imprinted in my memory as she left me behind, no echo of her voice offering comfort or explanation. All I have is the knowledge passed down to me later. She made a choice, one that would alter the trajectory of my life. The painful distance, limited contact with my mother. Although I didn't live with my mother, her presence still lingered in my life. Distant yet painful. The rare interactions we had never resembled the nurturing connection I imagined a mother and child should share. On my birthdays, I longed for a simple gesture, a phone call, or a message, but it never came. I would watch my cousin, who lived in the same home, celebrate with joyful birthday parties thrown by his mother. His father would take us both, and I would tag along, wearing the only dress I had, even though it wasn't the nicest. I enjoyed the celebration as his parties were the only birthday celebrations I knew. I yearned for a closeness with my own mother that always seemed out of reach, like something fragile and broken that I desperately wished could be mended. Shyness and isolation, the unseen impact of separation. From as far back as I can remember, during my early school years, I was a shy and reserved child. While other children laughed and played together, I would sit quietly by myself, always on the edges of their joyful chaos. I'm not sure if my shyness was connected to my separation from my mother, but deep down, I felt different from the other kids. I yearned for connection, yet I couldn't find the words or actions to bridge the gap. In hindsight, that persistent sense of isolation may have been one of the earliest signs of how profoundly her absence shaped my inner world. Endless wonder, the search for answers. Despite the distance between us, despite the unanswered questions, I never stopped wondering about her. What had shaped her decisions? What caused the rift that lay between us? Given away but not forsaken. As I was only 18 months old when my mother left me in my grandmother's care, I never fully understood the circumstances until much later. The story goes that my mother brought me to her amidst difficult times. The man believed to be my father had refused to take any responsibility. But my grandmother, deeply rooted in the belief of familial bonds, took me in without hesitation. She had her reasons. As a baby, I sucked my thumb, a habit that in her eyes was a sign. Her son, the man believed to be my father, had also sucked his thumb as a baby. To her, this was undeniable proof that I was his child, rooted in love and sacrifice. Those early years were defined by love, protection, and the unspoken weight of hidden truths. My grandmother and her husband raised me with great care, ensuring I attended early childhood school, a crucial part of my early development. I can still vividly recall the small, yet warm home we lived in, a place that felt safe, where I never had to question whether I belonged. But life changed when my grandmother and her husband divorced. The stable world I had known unraveled as we moved to a new home. It wasn't just a change of address. It marked a transformation in our entire way of living. We eventually settled into a new house where we stayed for many years. It felt like home, at least for a while. I lived there with my grandmother, her daughter, my aunt, and 2 cousins. This house became the backdrop of my childhood memories. It was where I first began to understand the complexities of family, the love, the challenges, and the sacrifices that came with it. My grandmother was a woman of quiet strength, doing everything she could to provide for us. But nothing in life is permanent. When the landlord eventually reclaimed the house, our sense of stability was shaken once more. It felt as though a cycle of displacement had begun. When home became unsteady, we moved from place to place after that, always searching for a sense of home, though nothing ever felt as permanent as those early years. Each new location brought its own challenges, and with every move, I learned to adapt quickly. I became skilled at packing up, settling in, and making the most of my surroundings. It would take me years to understand just how deeply those early moves shaped my ability to navigate change later in life. Despite the constant movement and uncertainty, I never forgot the feeling of being chosen by my grandmother. She believed in me when others didn't. She saw something in me, something as simple as a thumb-sucking habit, and turned it into a reason to love me. For that, I have always been profoundly grateful. Her constant belief became the lifeline I clung to through every storm, every new home, and every unspoken question about who I was and where I truly belonged. Lessons in hard work and discipline. Life with my grandmother was a blend of hardship and love, both deeply intertwined in the routines of our daily lives. Each morning, my cousin and I would set out on a long walk to school, our small feet trekking the sun-baked path under the relentless Caribbean heat. The journey felt endless, and yet it was simply part of our rhythm. At lunchtime, my grandmother would meet us halfway, bringing meals she had cooked with care. We'd sit together for just a few moments, sharing the brief respite before heading back to school. The walk home always felt longer, the weight of the day pressing down on us, but even as a child, I could sense her effort and sacrifice, though I couldn't yet fully comprehend its depth. Our home was small but sturdy, made of concrete walls and a zinc roof that turned every rainstorm into a symphony of sound. I can still hear the sharp, steady ping-ping-ping of raindrops hitting the roof at night, a rhythm that, though persistent, felt oddly comforting. That sound lulled me to sleep, a steady cadence that seemed to whisper assurances of safety. The house wasn't big, but it was solid. It didn't need to be grand to protect us. No matter how fierce the storm outside, I always felt safe beneath that roof, secure in the knowledge that it would hold. Life there was simple yet structured, anchored by routines that kept us grounded in love and discipline. My grandmother was a woman of unshakable discipline. In her house, there were no lazy days. Chores weren't optional. They were simply a part of life. Sweeping the yard with a bush broom, scrubbing clothes by hand, and hanging them on the line were all lessons in effort, self-reliance, and preparation for life. These tasks weren't punishments. They were life skills, gifts I carried with me long after I left her care. She carried herself with a quiet authority that demanded respect. She didn't shout often, but when she did, it was enough to make everyone pause and listen. My aunt, who also lived with us, had a different energy, a playful, sometimes light-hearted presence that balanced my grandmother's seriousness. Yet, when it came to family responsibilities, my aunt was as firm as needed. When I was still young and attending basic school, another male cousin moved in with us. For a time, our lives settled into a delicate balance, a mix of family responsibilities, occasional bursts of laughter, and moments of quiet understanding. But as much as our routines felt stable, change was on the horizon, bringing with it challenges I could not yet imagine. Silent storms, the unspoken chapter. Another male cousin moved in with us, and at first, I didn't think much of it. He was older, and I assumed that, like most adults, he would care for and protect me. Life continued as usual. The chores were done, school was attended, and our nights ended in a familiar rhythm. We gathered under the flicker of the kerosene lamp, said our prayers, blew out the light, and retired to bed. My grandmother often filled those evenings with her stories, rich with lessons cloaked in tales of mystery and the supernatural. There was the one about a crow circling a coffin, searching for a man named Mr. Brown, or the story of the woman who heard a kitten crying in the night, took it home, and was shocked to hear it speak. "You better carry me back where you got me from." These were not just ghost stories, they were warnings, reminders that the world could be strange and unpredictable. Sometimes she shared lessons from her own life, wisdom I didn't realize I would cling to until much later. It was during these moments, listening to her, sitting in the comfort of her presence, that I felt safest. She had a way of making me feel seen, heard, and understood, something rare in a world that often felt too big and too uncertain. But not everything about living with my grandmother was comforting. There were moments of unease I couldn't quite name, and feelings of confusion I didn't have the language to express. Much of it centered around my male cousin. Unlike my grandmother and aunt, he lacked their warmth, their steady presence. His presence unsettled me, though I couldn't yet articulate why. A fracture in innocence. The incident that changed everything is something I carried in silence for years. It's strange how the body remembers, even when the mind tries to forget. I won't go into the details now, but I will say this. In those moments, I learned what it meant to feel powerless. For a child who had been raised on self-reliance by my grandmother, it was jarring to face something beyond my control. The silence afterward was just as loud. There were no words, no conversations, and no explanations for why things like this happen. Looking back, I think about how children are taught to be quiet. We're told to mind our manners, respect adults, and not make trouble. I took those lessons to heart, but over time, that quiet became more than just obedience. It became a shield, a place to hide the things I didn't know how to face. I didn't tell my grandmother. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I folded the experience up and buried it deep inside myself, like a note hidden under a mattress, a secret tucked away where no one would find it. Life goes on. Life went on, as it often does, with secrets buried in the quiet corners of daily survival. My grandmother never knew the full weight of my pain. She taught me the importance of self-respect, with lessons often delivered through tough love. Yet, at times, I wondered if she ever sensed that a small part of me was fading, slipping away like a shadow at dusk. I held on to the structure and routine of home, even though it was far from perfect. The house where I lived with my grandmother before moving to live with my mother was modest, a humble board structure that bore the passage of time in its very bones. Unlike the neat, well-kept homes that surrounded us, ours showed its age in every crack and creak. The wooden walls were weathered, with gaps wide enough to reveal glimpses of the outside world. When the wind blew, it slipped through those openings, piercing the rooms with a chill no blanket could fully fend off. Carrying water and carrying shame. Water was always a struggle. We had no running water in the house, so I had to fetch it from a tap near an abandoned pig farm. I hated that task, not just because of the effort it required, but because of the shame it carried. School children would pass me as I balanced a bucket of water on my head, my heart sinking with every glance in my direction. I felt exposed, as if my poverty was laid bare for everyone to see. Sometimes, in a futile attempt to avoid humiliation, I refused to carry the bucket on my head and gripped it with both hands instead. But that only made the task harder. My grandmother would tease me, calling me Miss World, whenever I did this. "You want to look too cute to do hard work," she'd say with a smirk. It wasn't the work I minded. It was the fact that carrying the bucket made my family's struggles visible to everyone. I didn't want to be seen that way. Fighting injustice, the struggle of expectations and unequal responsibilities. My clothes had become a silent reminder of everything I lacked. They weren't new or fashionable, and every time I compared myself to the other children who lived in and around my community, I felt a pang of inadequacy. I was out of place, like I didn't belong. I tried to mask my discomfort by toughening up. I became something of a tomboy, running around and getting into mischief with my male cousin. But when it came to chores, the unease crept back in. Tying out the goats felt especially unfair. Why should I be the one to handle the animals? My cousin was a boy. Shouldn't he be doing this instead? I grumbled under my breath, stomped my feet, and let my frustration show. My grandmother didn't care for my protests. She snapped in patois, flinging words like stones. Feisty Pickney. Her voice rose as she carried on about how stubborn and feisty I was. I suppose she was right, though at the time, I didn't think of myself that way. I wasn't trying to be rebellious. I was simply exhausted by what felt like unfair expectations. Tying out the goats always seems like a task my cousin, being a boy, should handle. Yet I was often assigned to do it. Even after he left home, the chore remained mine, a responsibility I neither liked nor ever grew accustomed to. The struggle of unspoken longing. Growing up under my grandmother's roof was a journey defined by both love and longing. As a teenager, I often muttered under my breath, stomped around, and grumbled when I thought she was being miserable. At the time, I didn't fully understand my own actions. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like typical teenage rebellion, a child pushing back against discipline. But beneath that behavior was a quiet ache I hadn't yet learned to name. I had been given to my grandmother at just 1 year and 6 months old, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough for the loss to leave its mark. Even without the words to articulate it, I wondered why my mother didn't want me. My grandmother did her best, pouring her steady and unwavering love into me. Now, as an adult, I see that clearly. But back then, my view was clouded by the unmet need for a mother's affection. Every rule she set felt heavier, and every punishment seemed sharper, not because of what she did, but because of what I was missing. My backchatting wasn't just about testing boundaries. It was a silent protest against the invisible weight of abandonment. It was my way of asking, am I really wanted here? Hard work and determination. My grandmother worked tirelessly to ensure we had everything we needed. Her main crop was lettuce, though she also grew other vegetables to sell at the market. When the crops were ready, my cousin and I would carry heavy baskets of lettuce on our heads up the steep hill to our house, where my grandmother prepared them for market day. The baskets were burdensome, but we managed by using a cotter, a piece of cloth twisted into a ring to cushion the weight on our heads. It wasn't a daily task, but it was one that demanded patience and perseverance. Before dawn, my grandmother would catch a truck to the market, her produce carefully packed and ready to sell. In the evenings, my cousin and I would wait for her return at the bus stop, using a bottle torch to light our way through the darkness. The air was cold, but we didn't mind. We passed the time running and playing with other children until we saw the market truck finally pull in. Then, we'd help her carry what was left of her produce and head home together as a family, tired but fulfilled. In addition to selling lettuce, my grandmother would often travel to her mother's house in St. Thomas, another parish. I remember walking home from school in the late afternoon, knowing we had a long journey ahead of us. The walk to St. Thomas took hours, and we often didn't arrive until nightfall. Sometimes we'd have to stop and rest along the way, our legs weary from the endless stretches of road. Trucks and other vehicles would pass us by, and every so often, we were fortunate enough to catch a ride for part of the journey. Those walks tested my patience and endurance in ways I didn't fully understand at the time. They were tiring, even frustrating, but they also taught me a lesson I carried with me to this day: the value of perseverance. Discipline from my father and uncle. My father and uncle would visit from time to time, though never at the same time. These visits didn't bring joy or gifts, they brought discipline. If my grandmother mentioned that we had been misbehaving, we already knew what would follow. They would sit and listen to her recount stories about me and my cousin, nodding in quiet agreement, as if the verdict had already been decided. Whichever one had come would grab a belt. My cousin and I would both get spankings, no questions asked, no explanations given. It didn't matter who had done what. Looking back, however, I don't remember my father ever disciplining my cousin. He only spanked me, since my cousin was not his child. My cousin's father, though, would spank both of us. That difference still lingers in my memory. In those moments, I learned that discipline wasn't about understanding or fairness. It was about submission and pain. I longed for something different. A relationship with my father built on connection instead of punishment. But this was all I knew. His visits, brief and detached, left me with more questions than answers. What did I mean to him? Did he even see me as his child? Those unspoken questions lingered well into my high school years. They shaped my perception of what it meant to be cared for or not, leaving me with a complicated understanding of love and belonging. When one cousin left, another stayed. The cousin responsible for the incident that nearly changed my life was the first to leave the house. His departure felt like a storm passing. It wasn't completely gone, but heavy clouds lingered in its wake. Life around me didn't shift drastically, but his absence was palpable. Later, my other cousin left too. He was the one I played with, laughed with, and got into mischief with. He went to live with his mother in Kingston. His departure felt different. This time, I wasn't relieved, I was sad. He had been my playmate, my partner in childhood adventures. Then suddenly he was gone. With both of them gone, I was left alone with my grandmother. The house grew quieter, and I felt the weight of solitude settle around me. The lively energy of playing, running, and laughing was gone. All that remained was stillness, a silence that made the days feel longer and the nights even lonelier. The warmth I never knew. There is another memory that has stayed with me. It revealed a stark contrast in how my cousin and I were treated. When his mother came to visit him at my grandmother's house, even after hearing that he had been misbehaving, she approached him with love and compassion. She spoke to him softly, her voice full of care and understanding. By the time she left, he was crying in the bathroom. He was overwhelmed by the warmth he had received. In contrast, when my mother, who as far as I can recall, visited my grandmother once, was told that I had misbehaved, her reaction was harsh and cold. There was not even a flicker of love. I vividly remember climbing into a tree to hide, because I didn't want to be spanked. Later, as I followed her to the bus stop, I kept my distance and walked far behind her. I was afraid. I wasn't just afraid of her stern demeanor, but also of her sharp words that cut deeper than any punishment. There was no warmth, no tenderness, and no trace of the love my cousin had received from his mother. Hard lessons and unspoken pain. One of the hardest nights I can remember was the evening I came home late. I hadn't been doing anything wrong. I was just spending time at the game shop, losing myself in the small escape it offered from the heaviness of home life. But when I walked up to the door and knocked that night, my grandmother's expression told me she didn't believe me. Her suspicion cut deeper than words. Maybe she thought I was out with boys or doing something wrong, and she let her anger spill out unchecked. Then, without warning, she spat in my face. But I had only been at the game shop. The sting wasn't physical. It was emotional. A wound I couldn't rub away. I'd been trying so hard to follow the rules, to meet every expectation, to prove myself worthy of trust. Yet no matter how much I gave, it seemed like it was never enough. That night, the weight of that truth sank in. Sometimes, no matter how good you try to be, you'll still be misunderstood. An encounter at the river. One of the most defining moments of my childhood happened during a trip to the river. It was a place I often visited to bathe and find relief from the punishing heat. That day, I never imagined my life would change in a way I could never forget. While I was there, an older man approached me. His intentions were unmistakable as he grabbed me. I tried to fight him off, pushing and resisting with everything I had, but he was stronger than me. For a moment, I froze, trapped between fear and instinct. But even in that terrifying instant, I knew I wasn't powerless. I quickly came up with a plan. I told him I needed to water my grandmother's lettuce so it wouldn't wilt. My words came quickly, steady and convincing. I even promised I'd come back soon. To make my story believable, I left behind my underwear, my rag, and the soap, knowing they would serve as proof I wasn't running away for good. With that, I turned and walked away, my heart racing with every step. While he waited for me to come back, I ran home as fast as I could, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. Once I reached the safety of home, breathless and shaking, I told my grandmother what had happened. Her reaction was immediate, furious, loud, and unrestrained. She caused a scene that drew the attention of the entire community. She sent me to the police station. I was still too shocked to fully process what had just happened, but I followed her plan without question. At the station, the officers struggled to piece together the details, uncertain of exactly what had occurred. Later, I think it was my mother who took me to see a doctor for an examination. But since nothing physical had happened, there was no evidence to support the claim of assault. Even before I could process my own emotions, the story had already shifted. My grandmother's version of events took on a life of its own. By the time I found the words to explain what had truly happened, it felt as if my experience had been taken from me. My truth was buried under the weight of their version, and I was left powerless to reclaim it. Years later, I spoke with the young man's mother over the phone. I felt the need to bring clarity to what had happened, or rather, what hadn't. I explained to her that it wasn't actual rape. He had tried to have his way with me, but I escaped before anything more could happen. I told her I was sorry for allowing the story to stand the way it did. She responded calmly, saying, "Well, if he hadn't interfered with you, then his name could not have been called." And she assured me that it was well. Not long after that conversation, I learned that the same man had raped someone else. This time, he was sent to jail. That knowledge left me with a heavy mix of emotions. Relief that I had escaped, guilt for what I had once said, and sorrow for the girl who hadn't been as fortunate. The dream of living with my mother. As the years went by, I began to dream of a different life. My cousin had moved to Kingston to live with his mother, and I longed for the same opportunity. I wanted to be with my mother. I believed she could give me more than my grandmother ever had. A better life, a home where I felt safe, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to feel a mother's love, to know what it was like to be loved by my own. I was tired of the house we lived in, a place that seemed to be crumbling, barely standing against the test of time. I was tired of hauling water from the abandoned pig farm and tired of being mocked and called Miss World, because I refused to balance a bucket on my head. But the dream of living with my mother wasn't just about escaping discomfort. It was rooted in something deeper, a longing to belong. I yearned to feel like I truly belonged somewhere, to know I had a place where I mattered. The thought of moving to Kingston felt like a chance to start over, to leave behind the burden of chores that seemed endless and unfair. I imagined walking down the streets without the weight of shame, without feeling like my poverty was a billboard for everyone to read. A missed opportunity and a leap forward. I was an intelligent child, one who loved school and thrived in the classroom. My teachers saw my potential early on, and in my final year at all-age school, recommended me for the position of head girl. It was an honor and a recognition of all my hard work. A big deal not just for me, but for what it meant in my small world. But when the time came, my grandmother couldn't afford the expenses required for the role. The position was given to someone else. The disappointment hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about losing the title. It felt like I had lost a piece of myself. It was another blow to my already fragile sense of self-worth, a painful reminder that no matter how much I achieved, there were forces beyond my control that could strip it all away. A mind beyond limits. Despite the hardships I faced, there was one thing no one could take from me: my mind. I was sharp, quick to learn, and eager to understand the world around me. School became my sanctuary, the one place where I could escape the harsh realities of life at home. My teachers often recognized my potential, and I excelled in my studies. I was even bright enough to skip the 7th grade. That achievement wasn't just a mark of academic ability. It was proof of the resilience I had cultivated to survive. Still, I refused to give up hope. I was determined to move forward, no matter the odds. When the opportunity arose to take the common entrance exam, I believed it could be my chance to change my future. The exam was a gateway to high school and a stepping stone toward a better life. But my excitement was short-lived. The children selected to take the exam were required to attend a special preparatory class, and their families had to pay for it. My grandmother couldn't afford the fees. Without the money, I couldn't sit the exam. I was devastated, watching yet another door close because of financial struggles beyond my control. Then something unexpected happened. My vice principal selected 3 of us from among the top students in our class to travel to Kingston to sit for the entrance exam at a school there. I am deeply grateful I passed, and that success became my ticket to a new life. With this achievement, I saw a window of possibility. I asked my mother if I could live with her, so I could attend school in Kingston. For once, she said yes. Moving in with my mother felt like the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to rewrite my story. For the first time, it felt as though the ending of my life wasn't set in stone, and I was finally in control of the pen. Reflection, the roots that shaped me. Looking back on my years with my grandmother, I now see how deeply those experiences shaped the person I've become. At the time, I didn't have the words to explain it, But her love was there, embedded in every quiet sacrifice she made. She didn't express affection through words like, "I love you," but her actions spoke louder than anything she could have said. From the steady rhythm of daily chores to the shelter of a home that stood firm through every storm. Her care was a constant I couldn't always recognize. There were moments of frustration, back-chatting, stomping around, and rebellion born from an unspoken pain I didn't yet know how to name. But now I understand that her discipline wasn't about control. It was about preparation. She was teaching me to stand on my own, to rely on myself, and to endure even when life felt unfair. Her firmness, which I once resented, was her way of showing love. It was a love I didn't fully grasp as a child, but have come to deeply respect as an adult. Life under her roof wasn't perfect. It had its shadows, confusion, fear, and the painful loss of innocence. Those moments could have broken me, but they didn't. Instead, they gave me a quiet strength. I learned how to endure, how to keep hope alive even when the weight of the world felt unbearable. I realized that safety isn't always found in a place. Sometimes, it's found in the people who stand by you when life's storms rage. The years I spent with my grandmother taught me resilience, resourcefulness, and the power of quiet, unyielding love. Her belief in me, seen even in something as small as how she claimed me as her son's child, stayed with me. It became a lifeline I held on to through every move, every heartbreak, and every unanswered question about belonging. In her own way, she answered the question that lingered in the back of my mind. Am I wanted? Her actions told me I was. Living with my grandmother was a journey of love, hardship, and growth. Her house, with its concrete walls and zinc roof, became more than just a shelter. It was a space where I was shaped into someone who could face life's challenges. While I often longed for my mother's affection, I now realize I was never without love. It just came in a form I didn't recognize at the time. That concludes Chapter 1. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for Chapter 2 in the next video.